We're starting off with Ach Bir Inyan. You guys ready for it? After we finally figured out that a tzaddik is someone who's above and beyond the norm. And a Beinoni is someone who's practically perfect. So what is a Beinoni? We're not sure yet. But first we have to dig down to what a person is. And for the next few paragraph of Tanya, we're really going to be describing in detail the multifaceted, detailed makeup of a person. The question is, who am I? What am I? Let's find out. You ready? We're going to start off by bringing something from Rabbi Chaim Vital. Something very, very important. And he says like this in Shara Kedusha, that every Jewish person, whether you're a tzaddik or a rasha, has two neshamas. How do you know they have two neshamas? So he brings something very interesting over here from Sefer Yeshaya. You ready for this? It says over there that the ruach, the spirit, that comes is from me. Hashem says, the spirit of man comes from me. And souls I have made. And the neshamas and the asisi, and souls are made. So why does it say one spirit of man and two souls? A very simple explanation, because in one person, there is two souls. How are there two souls in a person? It sounds very strange. It goes like this. One soul, we're going to start off with one soul now. And then at the start of the next chapter, we're going to start going on to soul number 2. So one soul comes from Klippa and Sitra Achra. This is going to be called the nefesh habehamis, which means the animal soul. Now we ask you guys, what's the difference between a live animal and a dead animal? There's one animal, a deer, that's walking along happily, and it goes onto the road and it gets hit by a truck. What's the difference before and after? The difference before and after of why it's alive and why it's dead, because one of them has an animating soul inside, and the other, afterwards, the soul leaves it. So, just like an animal has to have a soul to be alive, a person also has to have a soul to be alive. And here we're talking about the lower soul in the person, a very basic soul that keeps him alive, keeps him going, and just like any animal, gives him, he has feelings, and he has instincts, and he has natural tendencies. You ever see an animal, anyone here has a pet dog? If you have a pet dog, the dog knows it needs to eat. And the dog knows when it gets hurt, it gets angry. A person's human soul is a bit more detailed than that, a bit nuanced, but the very, very basic level of the animal soul is just keeping you alive. Let's find out that this is a soul from the Klippa and Sitra Achra. What's Klippa and what's Sitra Achra? Klippa, when Hashem created the world, Hashem is everything. So how does he make a world that looks something outside of him? There's a concept in Kabbalah called a Klippa. Klippa literally means a peel. So a peel covers the fruits. Imagine you have a walnut and you want to eat a geschmack of walnut. You ever crack walnuts? It's hard work. Before Pesach, you go cracking some walnuts, Yoda? So before Pesach, you're cracking the walnuts and you find out the inside is the delicious fruit. The outside is a cover. So too, in the world, everything is deep down godliness and deep down goodness, but there's a cover covering things over, so we don't see it. So, the second phrase is Sitra Achra, which means the other side. What does it mean the other side? We're going to explain in Perek Vav Tanya that there's Kedusha, there's holiness, there's what's connected to Hashem, is holy, and then there's other. Anything that we don't see as direct connection to Hashem is considered other. So Klippa, it's covering over Kedusha. And other, what we don't see as Kedusha, those are both the same idea, and that's where the nefesh habehamis comes. It comes from something that's not directly godly, something that's a state of existence which is disconnected from Hashem as far as we're concerned. Deep down, obviously, everything's from Hashem. But on the outside, it's disconnected, like the peel. It's covering over Elikus. Everything in the world could either be from Kedusha, which means it's directly connected to Hashem, or it could be from Klippa, it could be from the other side, from the cover, that it's the external version, and we don't see its connection to Hashem. So this soul, the animal soul, comes from the outer side. It comes from the outside. There's a very interesting phrase about this. I want to read you something that it says in Shara Kedusha. You ready for this? It says that the neshama, the pure soul, is like the fruit, and it's invested in the impure animal soul, which is called the peel of the fruit. So both of them come together, and you have one within the other. So all parts of the godly soul, which we're going to learn about tomorrow, are invested within the animal soul. This is something very important that I don't know if people stress enough when they're teaching Chassidus. That there's not two different souls in a person which are fighting against each other, and the person is a schizophrenic. That means someone who has two different minds that he switches between, and he's just going insane. It means that a person is a deep person who has, on the outside, he has a body. Deeper down, he has a soul. Like you see a person, you see them, you see their body. Then you get to know a person a bit better. You find out they have emotions. That's a deeper level. Now, emotion is a very physical thing. Animals have emotions. People have emotions. It's a very physical thing. A bit deeper than that, the person has godliness, spirituality. So a person is multifaceted. And the deeper you go, the more you find out. We're going to be finding out in this chapter and the next chapter that a person has a body. Deeper than that is the intellectual soul, or the levush, which we're going to find out at the end of Perek Beis. Deeper than that is the animal soul that keeps on going and has all their natural feelings. And deep within that is the godly soul. And in that itself is a lot of depth in it. And every day, at every point of life, a person has a choice at what level they're going to operate. Right now, you can decide, am I going to be like operating on a body level? You could be running around the streets screaming like a lunatic, and your body's everything's working. You're just choosing to express the most outer and superficial version of yourself. You can then get involved with your emotions. Maybe you'll get angry at someone, or maybe a good emotion. You'll be kind to someone, and you'll be expressing a deeper version of yourself. You can decide to go above and beyond your emotions and do something altruistic, do something godly, do a selfless act. That's even deeper. That's a godly soul. We're going to get there soon. So now that we've figured out that a person has a physical soul that animates them, which that lives in the blood. Like it says that the soul is in the blood. So, and that keeps the body alive. So from this soul comes all different physical emotions. And first up, we're going to have starring the negative emotions. You ready for all the negative emotions that comes from the animal soul? Just like an animal has negative emotions, a lot of people have lots of negative emotions. And they come from the 4 elements. Now in Kabbalah, and you're going to find it in all of Torah, and in the secular world, this was the thinking of like early philosophers, that there are 4 elements that the world's made up of. Nowadays, you'll read in any scientific 7th grade class, there's a periodic table of over 100 elements. The reason why you're going to find that is for a very simple reason. It's a bit off topic, but it's something important to mention. The question why Chassidus is going to tell you over here, and it's going to say all over Torah, in the Gemara, in the Kabbalah, it's going to say that there's 4 elements, and as opposed to in your science class, you probably when you went to 7th grade learned that there's over 100 elements. I saw a letter someone wrote to the Rebbe that nowadays science knows there's 89 elements. And the Rebbe wrote back then, this is in the 50s. They wrote back then, firstly, you're reading outdated journals, because by now they discovered a lot more of them. But it's very simple. It's not a question of science. It's a question of linguistics. It's a language problem. We just happen to use the same word, elements. But the point, the reason we have language is to bring across an idea and a point. The point of why we call something elements is we're saying these are the building blocks that we make existence out of. Now, the elements that are seen in science, whether it's helium or oxygen, or whether it's one of the metals, gold. So all of these elements are made up of smaller particles. Until the smallest point of an element, the smallest you can get, is called an atom. An atom is meant to mean, in Greek, the singular thing. It's a thing that can't be broken down any further than it is. Why? Because like 100 years ago, scientists found that the smallest thing, that everything's made up of little things, and they're made up of atoms, which is the smallest thing. But then, years later, they realized that atoms are made up of smaller pieces, made up of protons and neutrons and electrons. And people are like, okay, we found the smallest parts of matter. And then they found out later that these are made up of smaller pieces. And science, every time they discover a new depth to existence, that everything's made up of small pieces, they say, we found the ultimate. You guys ever heard of the God particle? Call it the God particle. They discovered some point of existence that's the deepest there is. And I promise you in a few years they'll find something deeper. But until they do that, it's not at all a contradiction that there's 4 elements in Kabbalah and Chassidus against that of in science, because we just happen to be using the same word elements. But the point is that there's 4 things that everything in the world is made up of. And those 4 things are termed fire, water, air, and earth. Now, are they fire, water, air, and earth? Not especially. They're not fire the way we know it. Doesn't especially have to be that. It is a building block that everything's made up of these 4 things that is represented by fire, water, air, and earth. Now, why is it represented by that? You look in the Rambam, right at the beginning of Mishnah Torah, he says something very interesting. He begins to talk about how these 4 elements are fire, which represents things that have the properties of being hot and dry. Water is cold and moist. Air is what? Is cold and moist, and earth is dry and cold. No, the air is going to be the hot and moist. So, there's another school of thought. So there's one way of answering this by saying that all elements are made up of smaller particles, which eventually everything's made up of 4 things, which we term fire, water, air, and earth. And another way of looking at it, that these aren't specifically elements, the way they're referred to in science, rather the qualities of dryness and moistness, these different types of existences. Fine. Those are the 2 ways of addressing that. There's quite a few letters of the Rebbe on it if you want to go on a deep dive. So now, those are all physical elements. The same way everything is made up of physical elements, also everything spiritual is made up of spiritual elements. So let's go with spiritual element number 1 that's found in the animal soul. You ready for this? You have the element of fire. Now, what comes from fire? You have ego and anger. Now, by the way, ego and anger go together because people only get angry because of their ego. If someone feels that they don't deserve anything, they feel like super humble, someone's going to go and cut them off when they're driving, they're going to be like, okay, I don't deserve to be first. If someone has a bit more ego, someone cuts them off and they're like, excuse me, I deserve to be first. If they have like a more healthy level of ego. If someone has like a super level of ego, then even if someone was in front of them and you cut them off, you're still angry at them. Why didn't you let me go first? You know what I'm saying? So they go together. Why is it referred to as fire? Because fire rises upwards. And all these things of anger and ego is a person makes themselves haughty. They see themselves as superior to others. Next one is water. You know what comes from water? Water makes all pleasurable items grow. You think about food. It all has to grow from water. So, for example, Menachem, what do you like to eat? You like to eat bizli. Beautiful. Bizli is made out of grain. And that has to grow with water. Fine. So what do you like to eat, Hillel? You like to eat steak. And how are you going to have a steak without water? Your cow's not going to grow very far, is it? So that comes from the idea that deep down the element of water has the ability of the spiritual element of water has pleasure behind it. When someone's expressing the spiritual element of water, expressing negative feelings. And then you have, next one we're going to have to find out tomorrow. I can't believe we're out of time already.